Would like to call to order the regular meeting notice for today. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Wong,
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd Rami, Councilmember Talt,
Here.
Vice Mayor Jacobowski, here, Mayor Udi.
Here. The agenda is posted 72 hours prior to each meeting at the City Hall, the Kroll Public Library, and the Recreation Department. It's also posted on the city's website. We welcome public input. At this time, the public may address the council on items not on the agenda, but pursuant to state law, the council may not discuss or take action on any issues not on the meeting agenda. Please note that all comments will be limited to 3 minutes. City Clerk Baker, would you please explain how the public might comment?
Thank you, Mayor. For each item on the agenda, there will be time for public comment. We will accept comments in 3 ways. We will take in-person comments for each item. Please fill out a speaker card and turn it into me if you wish to speak on an item. We will also accept comments via email sent to cityclerk@cityofsanmarino.org. The email address is also found on the agenda. These will then be read into the record. We must receive these emails before the public comment period for the particular item ends. The comments may be summarized if necessary to limit to under 3 minutes. We will then ask for comments from our Zoom participants. When we ask for public comments via Zoom, there are 2 ways you can let us know you would like to speak. First, you can use the raised hand feature, which is a button that's found by clicking on participants and then clicking on raised hand on the bottom right side of the screen. Please do not use this feature until we have asked for public comment, or else we may not see it or know which item you are asking to speak on. As a second option, you can send a message using the chat box saying you would like to speak on this particular agenda item. Comments will be accepted only until the end of the public comment period for that item. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone here wish to speak at this time? Seeing none. Anyone in the virtual world have any comments?
There are no requests for comment
All
this
right,
time.
thank you. We'll move on to new business. Item number 1, the discussion of the city's 4th of July celebration plans. Staff, may we have the presentation, please?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Mayor Udi and council members. We are looking for some direction from you today regarding 4th of July activities. As you know, I had let you know a while ago that we would not be holding the event because the protocols were such that it didn't seem that that would be possible. Of course, the world is slowly shifting towards more hope and more openness, and it does look like some version of the event might now be permissible. Of course, the unfortunate consequence of that is we've lost 3 or 4 months of planning that we would normally have done by this point. And the event will not be exactly as it is normally because of the tremendous amount of resources that it will take to pull this event together in a short period of time. And due to the fact that the event will not look precisely like it's looked in the past, I'm looking for the council to give some direction on how you prefer that we move forward. So a brief summary of what the event would look like. Again, note this is close to, this looks like our normal event, but it is not our normal event and does have some adjustments. All of these adjustments are per the guidelines from LA County Public Health, so there really is no wiggle room on these. So the item before you today is essentially, do you want us to do the program as I'm about to describe or not? We can't really shift it around. So in terms of programming, the park would be open from roughly 6 to 10 p.m. 6 o'clock would be for people's arrival. 7 p.m. would be when the food trucks be available for items to be purchased. At 8 p.m., we would begin the program, which would look similar to the programs we've had in the past. The council would welcome the community. We would have an introduction of the Little League All-Stars. There would be a brief concert, and then that would culminate at 9 p.m. in a full fireworks show, which is approximately a 20-minute show. That's the length of our typical show. At that point, people would be strongly invited to exit the park and hopefully be out by 10 p.m. As I mentioned, there would be food trucks providing refreshments. The city, need the extra mic? Hello? All right. The City Club Pavilion would not be permitted based on the protocols for this event. In terms of attendance, the maximum number of attendees would be capped at about 3,000. That's based on a combination of factors, which is partly the capacity limit, which I think is 33% at this time, and also mixed with the available space. It's two different factors that govern attendance. So, excuse me. So approximately 3,000 would be the cap on attendance. That would include really anybody in the park, so staff, musicians in the concert, certainly the council, Little League All-Stars, and so forth. That number might need to move down slightly once we calculate the actual amount of space needed for the fireworks drop zone and the concert stage, but we think we could do a maximum of 3,000. The seating would be done in terms of pre-marked off squares, 10 by 10. Those are per protocols also. They would be spaced out, marked, they would be pre-assigned, and there would be a limit of 6 people per square. So as a result, tickets for the event would be capped at 6. Anyone wanting to purchase tickets would only be able to purchase a maximum of 6. I should have said, in terms of attendance, our typical attendance is somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000. 2 years ago, the last time we ran this event, we had about 9,200 attendees, and of that, about 6,300 were residents. So moving the cap to 3,000 does certainly impact the number of people who can attend. The park will be closed all day, and it will only open at 6 p.m. and obviously only then to people who have tickets for the event. Masking and distancing would be required. It does seem possible that in 2 months, the masking requirements will be different than they are today, but there likely will be some version of masking required. In addition, I would point out that although we don't run either of these events, the Blacksmith Run is going to again be virtual this year, we've been informed, and we've also been informed that Rotary's typical parade will again be canceled this year. So those two events either will not be happening or will be happening in a very different way. So we could do this event. We should have started 4 months ago. We did not, because it didn't look like it was going to be possible. If we start to do the event now, we are very much in a crunch situation. And so I want to walk you through that, because I think as a result of that, staff's recommendation is that we not hold the event due to the amount of resources that would be consumed for the quality of the program that we would eventually produce. To get this event done in 2 months, although possible, will require a significant shifting around of the priorities in the Community Services Department. There are a number of things that will have to fall by the wayside: new programming, day-to-day administration. Is it both? Sorry, thank you. Day-to-day administration and some of the pop-up programming. I think you also know that we're working very hard to try to put together an in-person Memorial Day event within the protocols, but to bring our veterans back and have that event, it will be difficult to do both of those events simultaneously, given the short time frame. This also isn't the event that the community is used to. We're very concerned about what's going to be involved in limiting the number of tickets, telling people that they aren't going to be able to come. We'll have to do it by a random lottery. There could be some challenges there as well. In the end, this will take tremendous resource. It will not be the event that we're used to. We are willing to do it if the council wants to, of course. We know that this community has been hanging in there for over a year. We are desperate for some sense of normalcy. I completely understand that that's what's driving the community and wanting this event. But we think that there are some overriding resource considerations that might make this not the best use of our time. In addition, as you know, our community services director has resigned for his reasons and is having his last day in the office today. That also dramatically impacts our ability to have the resources to run this program. So we have some concerns. We know that the community would like to have an event, and we will defer to you for your good judgment. If you do in the end decide to have this event, there are some questions that we do need some specific direction on in your staff report on page 1-4 about ticket purchases and revenue charges, because of course we don't typically make money on this event. We would project spending approximately $77,000 to make this event happen. We would realize at best $15,000 in revenue as a result of the $5 per ticket charge, which is what we typically charge. So the event will cost the city in the end approximately a net $62,000. So our recommendation is to not hold the event this year, sadly, and come back bigger and better than ever next year. If you do decide to go forward with the event, then we'd also like answers to the 3 questions on page 1-4, which is, should ticket purchases be limited to San Marino residents only?
If the answer to that is yes, should attendees be limited to San Marino residents only? And then the final question is, are you comfortable with the $5 per ticket charge? That concludes my staff report, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. I'd like to open this up for questions from council. Dr. Huang, do you have any questions?
Yes, I have a question for the little leaguers. Do they have to go through the lottery? How about their parents if they come, or are all the little leaguers allowed to come?
That's a great question. I would presume that the Little Leaguers themselves probably would not end up in the lottery. I think it would be a bad situation if we tried to introduce Little League All-Stars and they weren't there because they didn't get lottery tickets. We would probably grant them up to the 6, so that would cut into the 3,000.
And how about parents included in the 6, right?
Yes.
So
Well,
that
yes.
means so all the little leaguers, the parents can come.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Talt, do you have any questions?
Yes. The assumption here based upon the amount of estimated permitted capacity is based upon the present order, because isn't it up to 50%?
It's based on two things. The current order has a capacity limit, which is the percent. At the time that we were drafting this, the capacity was 33%. The capacity will likely be much more significant on July 4th, but we have to get pre-approval from the county for this plan. But the capacity is also based on spacing requirements. So the way that the order works is you have to satisfy both. You can have up to this capacity, but only as long as you can have this much spacing between groups of people. So once you take both into account, we think that the total capacity is approximately 3,000. It's not one or the other.
But the assumptions that are made in these numbers are based upon what time frame? Why we were in the orange? Why we were in the red? What? I've been busy trying to find what it was today, because these do change.
Yes, they do.
And for all we know, come Monday, it could be entirely different.
That is very true. That has been our experience so far. The distancing requirement is primarily what's driving the cap of 3,000, and that has not changed as we've moved through the tiers. So the percent capacity could go up to 100%, but if that 6-foot distancing is still in there, we're still capped at 3,000, and we haven't seen any indication that that's shifting. Although, as you point out, everything could be different on Monday, but this is what we have to work with today.
And the areas within the park that you measured for capacity are all but the area that falls within the firework fallout?
No, the firework drop zone would be part. The concert stage area would also take away space. And also there's a projection of where we would have the food truck station. That also comes out of capacity. Obviously, the playground doesn't count as capacity and so forth.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Shifarami, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I also had capacity concerns, as Councilmember Talt brought up, and I think, I'm sorry, take this off, oh, people could hear me. I also was wondering, given the limited time of 6 to 10, I believe is your target, to have both people arrive and eat or enjoy themselves and then have the fireworks show and the event or whatever, the presentation of the All-Stars and things like that. It's fairly short, modest amount of time, so I can't imagine that really food trucks and things like that would be necessary. I think I spoke to you about that, whether that's an unnecessary amount of space and amount of people that we'd have to count or deduct from our 3,000. And so perhaps like in years past, the Girl Scouts sold water and cookies, I don't know. The Boy Scouts had their little thing, and it was much more of a smaller, and those are also probably people in our community who would like to attend. So I wanted to discuss with you whether it's possible to coordinate those things instead of bringing in trucks and taking up that much space was a thought.
That's a great idea. There are two things off the top of my head that I can think of that could potentially be challenges. One is pursuant to Councilmember Huang's question, if we have people setting up booths and that sort of thing, that those number of people also count towards the capacity. So 2 people running a food truck, I don't know how many people run a food truck, 2 to 3 running a food truck might be different than 10 Girl Scouts plus their parents. It just depends on the capacity issue. The only other thing that I could think could perhaps be an issue is, although the protocols could change, we have to submit this proposal to the county now. And now intermingling between the squares is not permitted. It's not supposed to be a stroll around kind of thing. And some of our concern is that if we're open for too long without structured activities, people will start milling about the park because of course that's what we do every year. The whole point is to come out and engage with the community and your friends. And that's really not permitted. And then that's going to put staff in the incredibly untenable position of trying to tell people not to interact with their friends. So if we don't have the food trucks, then we're basically opening at 6. If we still even open at 6, it creates 2 hours of time where there's no programmed activity, there's nothing to focus them, and people may, want to go visit. And that becomes challenging for us.
Right. I think food trucks cut both ways because I do think if they're there, people will want to go check them out and they'll take up a lot of space and there'll be lines and crowds that way. So that cuts both ways in my mind. The other question that I had, you just brought up, when would be the last possible date that we would have to get plans approved through the county? As the numbers, we're going to the yellow stage. Also, there's issues of our community is very heavily vaccinated. Is that going to make a difference? I know you said there couldn't be a separate section because that further complicates and makes a difficult job for staff. But again, knowing that our community has been very rigorous in getting their shots and trying, I think most people are well on their way, if not already vaccinated. So I just wanted to know, how does that play in and benefit our community members who've done that and are well protected?
Sure. And I must agree with you. It's very exciting to see our vaccination numbers. It's really great to know how much of our community is protected and safe, and that is a significant source of relief. The initial question that you asked is, what is the deadline for getting the plans to the county? I think that it's something like 2 weeks prior to the event, but that's not really what's driving this. I'm telling you very frankly that staff's capacity to plan this event in 2 months is already incredibly suspect. We cannot wait until 2 weeks before the event to get it approved. We need to get it approved now so that we know what event we're planning. We don't have the capacity to plan multiple versions of the event in case the protocols shift with 2 months left. I mean, again, just as a reminder, when we're fully staffed in normal times, this is an event that takes 5 to 6 months to plan, and we're talking about really a 2-month period. So it's not being driven by when the county needs to approve it. It's being driven by our need to know what our event is going to look like so that we can really begin planning it. And the time is now, really. And so what I can say about the vaccinated piece is, although it's wonderful, the loosening up of the masks still would not include the 4th of July event. Now, is it possible that by July 4th, the vaccination issue would include an event like the 4th? Sure, it's very possible, but we don't have any information about that right now, and so we can't plan on that assumption. It is, I just want to tell you all, I think you all know, it is extremely frustrating to us. We love this event. We love to do this event. We talked about this quite a lot several months ago. We polled our surrounding cities. We tried to figure out if there was any way to do it. It just seemed clear that we couldn't. And then the county is shifting their protocols regularly. Things are moving so quickly, as Councilmember Talt has described, and we don't even always know what the changes are that are coming. This is from a 4th of July event only. This is very difficult timing for us to try to figure out how to do this and come up with the best plan forward.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, do you have any questions?
Yes, just a brief one. First of all, Dr. Marlowe and Ms. Fowler, I'd like to thank you for participating. I know you're regular with the weekly updates from health. So you certainly are on top of what's going on, and I know those hour calls are with a lot of information. With that, what would you imagine the specifics of an approval plan to look like? What would you envision to submit, and what would be expected of you?
I think what'll have to go to the county for approval, although they haven't given a specific format, is plans of the park itself, where things are going to go, how things are going to get spaced, a diagram, also a description similar to what's in your staff report, but probably a little bit more detailed about what the parameters are, how the protocols would be observed, and what we would be intending to do.
And it would be presumed that we would have our usual police and fire presence,
Yes.
correct? Thank you.
And would you envision this to be a lottery where people would submit their names and then pull them out of a hat to see which residents get a chance to participate?
I think it has to be, yes.
Okay. And would you envision you submit to the lottery and if you get it, you get 6 spaces, or would there be opportunities for residents to ask for 2 or ask for 4? Any idea or thoughts?
That's a great question. It's one that I've been wrestling with as well. I will tell you, for simplicity's sake, I would rather see it as you purchase a square for $30. Because from an administration point of view, given the time crunch, which is essentially $5 times 6
Okay.
people, that will make it the easiest. If we have to start drawing different size squares, figuring out different spacing parameters, that's a lot of administrative work.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then see if my math is right, that if we have capacity for 3,000 participants divided by 6, that's 500 groups have a chance to come in. And if we have Little League, I'm assuming there are about 15 kids on a team times 6 teams, that's getting close to 100. So then we're really coming from 500 down to 400 groups that could participate in the event. Does that seem reasonable?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, can I ask another
Yes,
question?
please.
How about 5 of us? Does the council have to be in the lottery too? I think it's only fair. We, be in the
Only if I
lottery.
get to be in the lottery also. No, I suspect that the council would be expected to be there. It's your event. You are the hosts. And so you plus 5 of your nearest and dearests would be welcome to come. I may still charge you though.
How about for the groups, like, let's say if I bring my family members and 2 other friends that are not residents, is that okay?
I don't know. You're going to tell me at the end of this if you decide to have the event.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll open it up for public comments. Ms. Baker, do we have any public comments?
We do have one. Mr. John Dustin, go ahead. You are muted, sir.
Sorry about that. Good morning, Mayor Udi, Vice Mayor Jacobowski, and council members. The annual Independence Day celebration at Lacey Park is absolutely one of my favorite events of the year. Some of my most cherished memories are going with my family to the 4th of July as a child, returning each summer when I was away at college, coming back to town, and now as an adult resident, gathering with friends and fellow residents in the park. The Lacey Park event is an event that brings us together as a community like no other event. The past year has been one of heightened stress for the fortunate and one of unimaginable grief for the unfortunate. Throughout the pandemic, we have heard the phrase, "We are all in this together." The conditions that will be required to hold the Lacey Park event safely would force us as a community to abandon some of our own. We should be better than that. As much as I love and look forward to resuming 4th of July at Lacey Park, it could never be a celebration of the things that I hold dear if by design so many residents would have to be excluded. We should wait to resume the 4th of July celebration until we can all be together. Please, let's leave no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dustin. Are there any other public comments?
There are no other requests for comment on
Okay,
this.
then I'd like to bring it back to council for discussion. Mr. Tolt, what are your thoughts?
I appreciate Mr. Dunstan's comment, and they did hit a heartstring. However, I'm of the opinion that we should move forward with the celebration because I think given the time, people will choose not to come anyway. And although we're in this together, there will be people undoubtedly outside watching the fireworks as they do. I think that if we work closely with Supervisor Barger's office, we could get an event that allows for over 3,000 people, and things are moving in the direction where we need a celebration, and this is the type of celebration I'd like to see. Thank
you. Dr. Wong, do you have any thoughts or comments?
Actually, I agree with Mr. Dustin. I mean, I asked myself this question: is it fair to all concerned? If we had to go through a lottery system, I think we're going to have a lot of angry residents. And also with what's happening in India, we're not sure if there's going to be another surge, and we're just risking our kids' life I mean, most of the adults will be vaccinated, and they say that should protect us, but who knows? So I'm inclined to not having it, because if we're going to have this party, I just want it to be perfect, just back to normal instead of just like, limited people. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. Councilmember Shepherd Romney, any thoughts?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is a very hard one. I know the community is very interested in bringing back 4th of July, and it is, as a commission chair, Dustin spoke, it is something that people grew up here or have lived here, even new members of our community really look forward to. And I hate to not have it. But I do know, both for people in and outside the city, this limitation is difficult, inviting people, friends, and if it's San Marino residents only, neither one of my kids, should either of them want to come back for it, are no longer San Marino residents, so then there's a complicating factor there. And to be fair, so we'd have to decide that, and again, it's drawing another line of exclusion, or even members of our community that live nearby but just moved away wouldn't be able to come back. So I do have a problem with the number, but I think I'm inclined with Councilmember Talt that we should proceed, because I think that the numbers are going to change, and I would envision in the next month there will be some more information from the county as to outdoor gatherings. I think it's happening fast. Our numbers are excellent in LA County, and I would like to see us hold off on setting a finite number at this time, give us another month and see what happens in LA County, because that's really who's controlling our cap. And I think that that will continue to press upward. I understand. I also think if we're creative with how getting rid of food trucks, doing some things that open up more of the areas and counting that, and thinking about spreading people maximum to the sides, and utilizing all those little entrance ways and things like that. I'm fine sitting there. The fireworks are great. So stick some of us in the back or the side. I'm good with that. But I would really like us to work hard and bring the community together at this time, because I think we need it. And it is an important tradition of San Marino. And I would hate to be in July and not have it and say we woulda, shoulda, coulda.
Yeah. Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. As everyone has commented, the situation really does change daily. And sadly, with the Community Services Director leaving us, that is one linchpin that will be affecting this. I am extremely public in how important the Memorial Day gathering is to me, for those community members that event represents, and I know that will take work for it to occur. We're a month away from that, and I know that hasn't gotten into full motion yet, so that will take a good part of May. We already have the cancellation of the parade and the run, and in reference to what Mr. Dustin mentioned, I think we're all pretty social, and being together for the first time, how in the world are we going to control not milling around, people feeling disappointed if all of their friends happen to get in the lottery and they don't. I actually have been getting a number of phone calls from residents asking when they'll, be able to pick up their supplies to do home decorating again, because they thought it was such a successful thing last year. As I previously mentioned, I would be willing to volunteer as much time as it would take to give our community an alternate 4th. And that could even include a spaced out bicycle tour with kids or whatever. It could be a little more than it was last year, but I just think we've got too many factors against us, and I really want to be careful about staff burnout, because going forward during the rest of the year, we really would like that staff to continue to bring the city to the community as we transition back to the community coming back to the city. So I'm just feeling with the multiple issues at this point, I sadly feel we should not be going forward.
When I look at this one is a tough one, probably one of the tougher decisions, because I really think it's a lose-lose. I think if we have a celebration, we lose because it's not all inclusive. And people are going to, feel like, those that don't get in are going to feel, discriminated against. And I think if we don't go forward, it's also a lose. But the feeling of not having the run in the morning and the parade and limited hours for this event, it's going to make it very difficult.
May I make a motion, Mayor?
Yes, can we have a motion, please?
I move to cancel the 2021 4th of July event as we traditionally have it, and direct the city manager to report back on alternate plans for community engagement.
Thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
We have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Wong,
Yes.
Councilmember Shepherd Rami,
No.
Councilmember Talt,
No.
Vice Mayor Jacobowski,
Yes.
Mayor Udi.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you.
Mayor, if I might just say, this was my fault for not saying this during the staff report,
Thank you.
but when we thought we were canceling the event 2 months ago, we already started working on some alternate pop-up plans for the week before, so I'll be delighted to report back to you on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to new business item number 2, the presentation of the 2021-22 proposed operating budget by department. And before I invite staff for their comments, I'd like to ask the other finance liaison to comment on the process. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. There's not too much in city governance that I consider to be great fun. However, working with my colleague, our finance director, our city manager, over the last, I'm sorry, Director Chung, how long have you been here now?
A little over a year and a half.
Year and a half. Has been an illuminating and growing experience. And the one thing that I'd like to bring forward today, ongoing improvements we are feeling to finance in general and the budget process specifically. I'm finding that everything has become much, much more user-friendly, which brings us to where we are here. And I hope my colleagues are thrilled that they don't have to listen to my questions as we go through the disbursements each month, because I do read every single check. And when we have our monthly finance meeting, it's never to question the spending, it's to see if things can be consolidated or how they might be accounted for going forward with projections. And Director Chung has been phenomenal in grouping things so we have a true picture across city lines. So even that part of the process is reflected in what we're seeing today. I just feel that it keeps getting better and better, and I think there is something that could be a phenomenal ongoing template for this process, and I just appreciate all the work that has gone into it. Thank you.
Yeah, and before I turn the microphone over to Director Chung and the city manager, I want to thank you for you and all the staff for the hard effort going through this, and congratulate you on your performances last year. As you see in the commentary, there were a lot of decreases versus budget from the last year. So thank you for watching for the pennies. To the fellow council, you'll see where the increases are. Many of them come from the labor agreements that we passed. You'll also see as we go through the discussion that we've been spending more on capital, so depreciation expenses are higher, which is a non-cash item. It's an accounting item, and I think this budget presentation is the best I've seen from the city so far. So thank you very much, and it's all yours.
All right, thank you so much again, Mayor. I just want to make a couple of brief comments on process before I turn it over to Finance Director Chung to walk you through the numbers, which definitely is his forte and not mine. So I'm delighted to do that. It has been an excellent year and a half, as Vice Mayor Jacobowski indicated, working with Paul on everything related to finances, but especially the budget. We made two changes this year to the process. I just want to walk you through those briefly. Once this budget process concludes, we will be interested in your feedback on those two changes to let us know if you thought that those changes were for the better, if you'd like to see something different, or if you'd like to revert back to the way that it was. One thing that we did differently this year is you'll see that each department had a cover memo. We've never done that before. Some people are numbers people, like Finance Director Chung. Some people are words people, like myself. And so we wanted to give you the information in both formats so that you could do whichever was more comfortable for you. So I very much appreciate the work of the executive team in pulling together these memos, which is something that we've never historically done, and tried to walk you through the key highlights of what's going on in each budget. So interested in your feedback once this process concludes. The second thing that we did this year is, as you know, we shifted the priority initiative terminology and program. In previous years, the council has adopted priority initiatives that has driven our work process going forward. As you will recall, we've come back to you each year somewhere between 3 to 5 times on every single priority initiative and had you rediscuss it and vote on it and re-vote on it and re-vote on it. This year, we departed from that process to try to save a little bit of your time and ours. And instead, what we did is we had a discussion with you all in January for brainstorming items that we might consider for next year's budget and or work plan. And we then asked the community to brainstorm as well. That's not something we've ever done previously. Previously, we had just asked the community to comment on what you all had brainstormed, but they wanted a chance to have ideas of their own. And so we gave them that opportunity this year. And so in your agenda packet on page 2-5 begins the summary of those responses. So what's included in here are the brainstorm items that council members gave us at that January meeting. As a reminder, you did not vote at that meeting, so none of the items suggested carried a majority vote because there was no vote. So we just treated them as brainstorming items. The list on page 2-5 also includes any item that was brainstormed by members of the community. However, since we already knew what your ideas were, we also posted those. So if you see over in that third column, I guess technically it's the fourth column, the interest level, these are items that council members had brainstormed that we put up for the community to comment on. So if you see something that reflects the percentage interest level, those were items that were brainstormed by the council, and the community took their opportunity to weigh in on how important this was to them or not. If you don't see those percents, that's because a community member suggested those, and therefore the community did not have a chance to offer their thoughts on those. What we did is we took all of these items and we took them under advisement as brainstorming items and had long discussions amongst ourselves and with our departments about which ones we thought would best serve the needs of the city and the community and the organization. And we've incorporated those into the budget, both operating budget, which you're hearing about today, and the CIP, which you've been hearing about repeatedly, and we'll hear a little bit more about next week. So today, you certainly have the ability to decide you don't want to move forward with some of these things that came out of the community and your feedback, or you could decide you do want to proceed on some of the things that we had not proposed. I would point out that we got responses on this brainstorming from 43 residents. So I don't know if that impacts your thought on the sample size, but just so that you're aware, we did hear from 43 residents. On the one hand, we thought that that was pretty good. Given our attendance at some of our town hall meetings. On the other hand, it certainly would not qualify as a statistically significant sample, but this was a first time out. So you have that document in here as well. Other than that, we are here today to do an overview of all of the operating department budgets for all departments except community services, which will be next week. And I am delighted to turn it over to Finance Director Chung.
Thank you, City Manager. And even before I begin, I do need to thank the council for their time. And I know we met this week regards to various questions and whatnot to follow up on various items of the budget. I know this is a tedious, sometimes monotonous process. I have also heard comments of boring, but I take it as a compliment, meaning that the budget process is a crucial document. It's a spending document for next year for all the community goals and council goals as well. So I believe it's a very important document that basically touches all parts of the organization. And I do want to appreciate the finance liaisons working with me to improve the process. Of course, the city manager, directors, and the staff, budget liaisons, everyone that's been involved in this process the last 2 months, 2.5 months. Whether we go up $1, down $1, or a $10 million increase, the amount of effort that goes into the budget is the same. So I just wanted to emphasize that, and thank you. So with that said, let me begin with my presentation. The agenda today would just be covering the year-end summary for the council regards to our current fiscal year, and then I'll be going into next year's budget. I'll take a pause there and take questions from the council, and then we'll jump into the department budgets after that. The department budgets will cover all departments except community services, as we're going to cover that next week with the CIP update. Let me begin with the COVID update, as that's part of our year-end summary. On the COVID fiscal side, we've received $181,875 through the CARES Act. As of, I forecast that we will spend $275,917 by this fiscal year end. We've been tracking COVID expenses since March of 2020, so that's the total basically we've spent in the since the pandemic has started. We are anticipating a $2.4 million funding from the American Rescue Plan Act that was signed by President Biden a couple of months ago. Just to touch on that, we are expected to receive it in what they call 2 tranches or 2 buckets of monies. The first half of that, so 1.2 million, is expected to come in this fiscal year, and then the other half will be coming in next fiscal year. And that also, that money is reflected in the budget as well. And lastly, we are projected to spend $71,250 next year on COVID, and that's also reflected in the expenditure budgets as well. I think the way I reflect on COVID expenses, San Marino continues to be fiscally strong and stable. And I do believe that that's the decisions that the council has made many years ago regards to budget decisions to keep the budget status quo, to keep expenses under control, and that reflects today as well. As you've probably heard from other agencies, there's been furloughs, layoffs, program cuts. They stopped CIP projects, and they've also reached out to get loans to cover operation costs. We did none of that, but we are going to be exiting the fiscal year stronger. So I wanted to commend the council and city manager regards to the decisions we've made fiscally. We are not out of the whole woodwork of COVID. We do have impacts. We did have closures on public facilities, and local businesses were impacted, of course, due to the mandated closures. We did see some decreases in revenues on the community services side, sales tax, investment income as treasury yields were basically to zero, and then parking citations as we froze that program. But also on the flip side, we had an offset of decreased expenditures, mainly driven on the community services side, also some on the PD side for crossing guards, and then of course travel and training was halted. So we did see savings there. Holistically, on the year end, on the general fund side, I'm forecasting that we will end the year at revenues of $30.5 million. As I mentioned, this includes the $1.2 million of the ARPA funds. It's a weird acronym, but yes, that's what they're calling it, the ARPA funds. Expenditure side, we are expected to end the year at $24.4 million. So net income, or we call excess cash, would be close to $6 million. Of that $6 million, of course, we have that one-time monies of ARPA of 1.2. So really, we're looking at about $4.8 million. And that's really COVID savings. Also, we had some salary savings through the year. So we do expect to end the year at about $6 million that the council can of course, fund CIP for next year as well. Overall, we will end the year fiscally healthy. Moving on to the next year's budget, 21-22. This is on the general fund side. I forecast the revenues to be at $31.4 million. That's a 4% increase from our current budget. On the expenditure side, we will remain at, we will be at $27.8 million. That also will be about a 4% increase from our current budget. Overall, we should end the year next year at about $3.6 million. I just wanted to highlight that, as Mayor had mentioned, that on the expenditure side, most of that is, of course, personnel and the contractually obligated amounts. And then on the service and supply side, which I'll get into in a little bit, are some of the discretionary or also community goals and council goals that if we move forward with that, that impacts our budget, but also overall, if we take that out, we are actually decreasing in budget. So I wanted to emphasize that as well.
Does that revenue number include the 1.2 ARPA that you expect next year?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Before I jump into each of the budget regards to revenue and expenditure, just the historic cash balance, I wanted to show the council that overall, the blue line is our revenues, and then our orange line is our expenditures, and then the bottom gray line, I wanted to show the cash or net income that the city keeps. So overall, as you can see, that our revenue maintains to be above our expenditures, which is always a good sign. We expect, as I mentioned, this fiscal year to end at 6.1, and then next year at 3.6. I just wanted to highlight that we do have quite a bit of CIP in the next 5 years that's coming on the horizon. And just to highlight a few, $7 million in stormwater, 4.3 in wastewater, and then that's not including the annual road work. So we do have quite a bit of CIP. So we do want to build up that cash reserves to fund these CIPs in the near future. Moving on to the revenues for next year. As I mentioned, revenues are expected to increase by 4% next year. Just focusing on the general fund side, because that's where the majority of our revenues reside. It does include 1.2 million of the ARPA funds, as the mayor had questioned, and also for me on the property tax side, as you know, that is our main revenue driver. I forecast it to be a 4% increase. Just to let you know that this year, property taxes remain strong, and I forecast at 5%. We are exceeding that 5% increase, so we are hitting our forecast on property tax revenues. We do expect a decrease in the revenues on the recreation side, and that's mainly driven by the cancellation of the before and after school program, and also some of the facility rentals as Stoneman can't be rented due to AD requirements. And then on to the expenditure side, as I mentioned, the expenditures are expected to increase by 4%. And I believe the best way to get the expenditure is really sorry about that. So expenditure side, I like to look at it. Yeah, sorry, we're having some mic issues here. I think that's better. Thank you. On the expenditure side, I like to look at it really down to two main categories. There's the personnel side, and personnel is expected to increase by 3% or $570,000. On the service and supply side, which that's mainly the discretionary day-to-day operational expenses that are tracked there, is going up 6.5% or $521,000. And then we have the debt service. Just to break it out into those two main categories, personnel. The reason for the big increase is mainly contractually agreed upon, meaning we have the 2% increase for the MOUs, we have benefits also included, and the pension that's going up. We also included the 1.0 FTE or the full-time equivalent for the code enforcement officer that the council approved this current fiscal year. But also we have a decrease of FTE, 3.9 decrease for next year due to recreation, as I mentioned, before and after school program cancellations and some of the limited programming for next year for recreation. On the service and supply side, I just want to highlight really three items. Even though it's increasing by 6.5% or $521,000, in that includes a $600,000 general plan, also includes a $40,000 citywide program marketing under the city manager's office. And that marketing really includes not only City Hall, of course, but economic development promotions, community services promotions, and public works CIP projects as well. And then the last item that I believe non-accountants has a hard time wrapping their head around is really the equipment cost allocation. It's a fancy word for depreciation. I know that's an accounting word, but basically it's the equipment that's purchased through the year, and we do need to reflect that and decrease its life over the year as it the asset gets less valuable as time goes. One recommendation that was asked was to maybe put a footnote in the budget document. So before I bring to the council the proposed budget, I will definitely add a footnote there to just clarify any questions regards to it. But as the mayor mentioned, this is not a cash impact to the general fund. This is just an accounting entry.
Those three items are $798,000, and you're showing an increase of $521,000. So that suggests that you have savings or reductions in spending of 277 across the board?
Yes, I would say that that's a good way to view it if you want to take those one-time items out.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Questions, but we do have this depreciation every year, right?
Yes, we do. Yes. So I do have a document, and if the council is interested, this year, the total depreciation, $608,000. Last year, or I guess this current year, is $450,000. That increase of $158,000. That main driver is in the police side because we purchased the 6 vehicles and the 2 motorcycles this year, and we of course have to depreciate that. The Public Safety Commission, when I met with them, one of the commissioners had a question on that regards to what's the life, and it was a 5-year. We depreciate that, being that we want to replace these on a 5-year cycle. One bullet that's not up here, but also I want to emphasize, is the utilities. Utilities are going up, especially on the electric and water side. They're about 5 to 8% reflected in the budget as well, but also telecommunications also is going up considerably, and that's really driven by the landlines. I've actually met with our IT consultant, and we are actually looking into options to other alternative options to decrease that, but that increases are reflected in next year's budget. That concludes just the first half, as I will open up to council before I go into departments for any kind of questions regards to what I've presented so far to the council.
Any questions or comments on the overview? Mr. Toll?
Well, it's not really on the overview, but it details all the department budgets. Is a question I wanted to ask the other day. What goes into the cafeteria benefits? Because when I take a look at the overview, and you don't provide an overview of how much we're spending on cafeteria, but you do on the increase in cost. In some departments, it's gone up 1.5 times what we had 2 or 3 years ago. In another department, it's almost 2%. One department shows a reduction, and I would understand that's related to a decrease in personnel, but what is all the cafeteria benefits when they're listed on your documents?
So when we refer to cafeteria, that really encompasses, the main driver is our medical, vision, and dental program. That's captured in there. Also, life insurance and disability. Those 3 are the main drivers of what the cafeteria benefits encompasses.
But isn't it, how much gets allocated to each employee?
So for next year, I do know that it's per full-time employee on just the health side, which is the main component. I know it's a little over $18,000. I don't have that exact spreadsheet in front of me, but I do know it's a little over $18,000 per full-time employee. Yes.
And then what is we have a $1,200, $2,000 option. Is that part of the cafeteria benefits?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Shepherd-Romey, any questions at this point in time or comments?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I wanted to follow up and most concerned about the increase in doubling almost of our telecommunication budget across all of our departments. And I think part of that is linked to the landlines, but also I went back and looked at last year's and the number of 66 cell phone lines and 20 connected devices for data, which I assume are iPads or tablets of some sort. So, and then there were additional 12 lines added. And so I really want us to, and appreciate if you would delve into this, because I don't know that all of those are being used. And I think that we discussed some of them are at a premium rate because they're part of FirstNet, you know, for our first responders, but whether all people involved. need those because that seems to be something we can control. And though it's not a huge ticket number, that money saved will go to other things that we want to do. And some of these are modest other programs that maybe we're going to have to pass on this year because of, in my mind, how much our utilities, telecom, water, all those things are going up. I mean, at some point, we just can't do extras if we have a significant increase in every department across the board in, necessities. So can you tell me how, is it possible to do a survey and see what's landlines, who all has landlines, who all has cellular and other means of communication? I just don't know and can't, I don't know if it's here.
Just wanted to make sure on the mobile cell phones that we have, that's not part of the utilities telecommunications budget. We actually, that's under my budget, under non-departmental. We actually have a separate line item called cell phones in there, so that number is not included under utilities telecommunications.
What I think I'm hearing from the council members, that if you could just do a quick audit, and come back at some time with what that schedule looks like, that would be helpful. Okay.
Excellent idea.
Right, and just to follow up, so under the finance department, I think we spoke about this. I don't see cell phone per se, but there's equipment cost allocation.
I think what we're going to do is we're going to go department by department. So if we want to drill down, why don't we wait till we get to that department?
Okay, I just am following up on his comments, and then I'll continue. Thank you, Mayor. So equipment cost allocation, it's gone up more than 30,000 in the last 3 years, and this year alone, it's going up 21,000. Is that the line item for what you're calling cell phone?
No, under finance for that particular item, it's our PCs, staff PCs that are being depreciated.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And just to answer the question on the telecommunications, what I can do is on quarterly, when I come to the council regards to the status of the quarter, I've been doing one-off type of special items that the council is interested. I can also give you that breakdown. I could do the analysis regards to how many landlines, what service are we using, what internet are we paying for and whatnot. And I could do that and give you that detail. One thing I just wanted to add was that I did do an audit regards to the iPad data that we've been using. And I've actually taken away a few from the departments, being that we do use hotspots for our cell phones, so that's cheaper. It's $5 versus spending $45 a month. So I did do that audit.
No.
So I'll give you that report to the council.
Could you come to my house?
I would take away a lot of things.
Thank you, Director Chung. I really appreciate that. And also, I had a question concerning the general plan expense.
Okay.
And I think that
Again, I think when we get to the departments, we'll be able to drill down on it. This is just the overview. And then what we're going to do is go department by department and have the opportunity to ask questions. Dr. Wong, any questions on the overview?
Yes, well, Director Chung, I asked you about the PERS for the total year, for the all departments. And you told me it's about 4.3 million. When do you see that to decrease or level off over the years?
Unfortunately, I don't see that decreasing. That would only increase.
Or level off? No?
No, I wouldn't see that leveling off. As I think in fiscal year, not next year, but the 22-23 fiscal year, you might see a bigger increase because of the CalPERS and the constraints that we are under them regards to how they invest and then do the returns on their investments. And so we do expect it to increase, not stabilize or decrease.
Okay, great, thank you.
Vice Mayor, any questions at this point?
Yes, just a few. Thank you, Mayor. On the ARPA, 2 questions. What can't it be used for? First question. And second, since this is over 2 fiscal years, this theoretically could take us to the last day of June in 2022. And are we 100% confident that dollar amount will be in escrow waiting for us to plan to use? And if you could comment on both of those. Thank you.
Yes, so regards to the question on what we can't use, this is straight from the U.S. Treasury. They mentioned that the state cannot use the funds towards pensions or offset revenue resulting from tax cut enacted since March 3rd, 2021. local governments cannot use the funds towards pensions. That was emphasized and emphasized many times. Regards to when the funding actually needs to be spent, Vice Mayor, it's actually, we have a deadline of December 31st, 2024. So it's not that next fiscal year that we need to spend all the, basically the $2.4 million. We just have to spend it by the 2024, December 2024.
And my apologies for not being clear in what I was asking. I'm sure people have no problem spending it, but what I'm concerned about is, since it's quite a ways out to the second deposit, and again, things change, government change, has this money for year 2 been put into an escrow account?
Oh, I see.
Or are we just being told, don't worry, you've got it?
It's not in an escrow account. The U.S. Treasury is still finalizing policies and guidelines to all state, local governments. It's sitting, what I've been told was that it's sitting with the U.S. Treasury, and that it's getting ready to be allocated to the states and the local governments. Regards to the next year's $1.2 million, all it states is that after we get our first a tranche or bucket of money, that the next half is going to come in 12 months after. No more than 12 months after the first payment.
And what approximate date are you given for bucket 1?
They haven't even provided it, and
Okay.
many agencies are still kind of scratching their heads, but what we were told was it's going to come in before the fiscal year end.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, just want to make sure we can take it to the bank.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I have no questions or comments, so for the public and council, Director Chung is now going to take this department by department, give the overall presentation, and then it's the opportunity to ask questions and drill down on expense items in those departments. So
Great.
Director Chung, can we have the first department, please?
Yes. The first department is the city council's budget. My clicker is not working. I'm having technical difficulties this morning. Okay, great. City council's budget. City council's budget for next year is $33.6 thousand. And the main driver for that increase in their budget, or in your budget, is the $5,000 marketing and publicity cost. Everything else is status quo on your budget. I would turn it over to the mayor in regards to questions. And
Any questions regarding the proposed city council budget? Seeing none, can we have the next department, please?
Yes, the next department is city attorney. City attorney's budget for next year is.
Can I just ask, are we
Yeah.
going to come back to this?
No, do you have any questions about the proposed budget
Oh,
under
okay.
the city council?
No question.
Okay. Yes.
Apologies. In addition to answering any questions we have for you, this is the primary opportunity for you to make any changes to what you're seeing in front of you today. We're going to bring back a proposed budget on May 29th that includes whatever direction you give us today. So I would say we're looking for questions and direction.
Yeah, so if you have any comments on the proposed city council budget?
Yes, I definitely do.
Okay.
I do not think that the marketing and publicity cost is necessary. I think that each department has, through their own ways, different ideas, and community development is a good example. We have a significant amount of money parked for such goals and that, as well as, I think, recreation when it comes to it for their own. So I don't believe we need to market our city and should be spending such a significant sum on that.
Quick question, is this 40,000 all-inclusive for the city, or are there marketing expenses in individual departments as well?
Good morning. We have yields. When you get to the city manager's budget, we can talk about this. There is an inclusive citywide marketing budget proposal we have for you. This one was a specific request that's more about specific one-off occasions when city council's asked to promote the city through advertisements, for example, the Chinese Club's Mid-Autumn Festival. Of course, with your direction, we could incorporate into other budgets, but this was an idea of when city council specifically is asked to help contribute to a city. We see this as another way of advertising. So with your direction, we're happy to go either direction.
And how much is the marketing budget in the city manager's bucket?
We proposed $40,000, but of course we can talk
Okay.
about that.
Okay, and I would tend to agree that, 40,000 here does feel like a double-double. Other thoughts or comments on on the marketing, Mr. Fowler?
Just to be clear, and Councilmember Shepherd Rami, we are talking about the marketing publicity, the $5,000 that's accorded here. I agree that we don't need a separate marketing and publicity. And if someone comes to city council and says, will you support something? It's just something we've always done out of our own pocket. You know, it gets expensive, but
Is this number 5,000 or 40,000?
it's,
This is the $5,000 number, and the request here specifically was to take costs that council members pay out of their own pocket, their personal monies, that are really city expenses, and transfer them more appropriately into the city budget. So as Community Engagement Manager Fowler indicated, the MAF brochure is one example that traditionally the council members have paid out of their own pocket. The Motor Classic is another example of things like that. That's why we house this in the city council's budget, because it replaces funds that you all are normally paying for out of your own money.
And again, it's a $5,000 number, not
That's
a,
correct.
not a 40,000. Okay.
nonetheless, I'm still against it. Thank you.
And I am as well.
Dr. Wong, what are your thoughts around $5,000 for covering these expenses?
I'm okay with it.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
I think I've made the same comment previously. The reason I would support it is not so much for the council as we sit right now, but there will be future composition of this council that may not reflect all of us. And I've had conversations with members of the community who have said to me, you know, I have an interest in city council. I know that you each are asked to submit donations to different events, and that might be a hardship for me, particularly for people who may have additional family expenses. So that would be my main reason to support it, not so much for us as we are now, but to use that as a marketing tool in the future for council members. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I would support the 5,000 because I personally, you know, we're giving a lot of time here. And I don't like the idea of me giving volunteering time and also having to, you know, write checks during the year. So I would support this.
Can I respond?
Yes.
If a future council wants this, they could vote it in.
It's harder to vote for
Okay.
yourself in your wishes rather than having someone set it out for you. And it doesn't mean that we have to use all of it. We still have the discretion to say, you know what, I'll cover my own. I just like the option.
How do we respond? How do we decide where this money goes?
Right, that's my.
Do we say, I'm sorry, PTA, the city council won't do it, but Motor Classic, we will?
Right.
Our traditional asks. So we've been asked for the Motor Class, we've been asked for the Mid-Autumn Festival. You know, just some of the traditional things. I know earlier on, I was asked to support a number of events by community groups. And, you know, one year it was a fair amount of money, which I certainly didn't talk about, but I would just like us to leave that option for the future so that they wouldn't have to ask themselves if they were in that position. And we certainly can say, you know what, the city can pay for part of, say, Auto Classic, I want to pay for my own.
Actually, so we're gonna have more requests once we have this budget.
And also,
That just occurred to me, so,
go ahead. Sorry, Councilmember.
no, yeah.
I'm along the same lines. I think that we have a lot of groups in town. I know just the library and their destinations. We have so many things that we support, and PTAs, of course.
But
and
we've done
different
that
groups.
individually.
Right, so then, but we're setting aside money now to make a statement because some of them, well, I think this is the wrong thing to do. I think we individually support groups in town to the extent that they appeal to us, and there's a few occasions, and we can turn down buying a page in certain events if it doesn't, it's not positive for us.
Why don't we have
And to
a,
create this is opening up a huge issue for the future. As, just like all of these, when you put it in there, next year it's going to be 10,000, the following year it's going to be 20. The only good thing is there's no PERS on it. But,
why don't we do a quick show of hands? How many would like to keep?
Mayor and council members, if I may just make a quick comment on this topic.
Yes?
So what I'm hearing is that the issue is whether or not the council or council members would be able to be reimbursed for expenses such as placing ads in particular organization newsletters.
City Attorney, I'm sorry, but no, that's not correct. The budget item here would be for the city to pay for those things directly.
Okay.
This is not a reimbursement account. We do typically have two requests, the MAF and the Motor Classic, that requests an ad by the whole city from the city council that then we divide by 5. This is for those. So I'm sorry, City Attorney Cow, but it's not for reimbursement purposes.
Okay, then my comment needs not be made.
Let's just do a quick show of
Well,
hands.
I just want to make one more comment. We just talked about an event, one for all for one. Right now, we will be asked to choose between what events we support. So either it's got to be 100,000 or nothing, because that's the way it's going to end up.
But what ones are we currently asked to support as a group beyond the ones that we've traditionally supported,
Well, the money from the city budget comes from the residents.
right?
And we'll be asked eventually to choose between which community-based group we will use city money for and which we will not. And to me, that seems a difficult choice in the future. So, I mean, I just wanted to get that out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's just do a quick show of hands. How many people would like to keep the $5,000 in next year's budget? Please raise your hand. How many would like to remove it? Okay, there's your feedback. Next department, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, a lot of issues here. The city attorney's budget is $273,000 next year, and that's all service and supplies budget. There's some ups and increases and decreases, but the increase is the $35,000 in general legal services, and that's part of the new RFP that was submitted. There's also a decrease in litigation for $53,000, and then the COVID budget that was approved this year is not rolling over to next year. I wanted to turn it over to the mayor.
Any questions or comments on the proposed city attorney budget?
So as everybody, I just think we should state for the public, we are in a process with RFPs out. So this number, I'm assuming, is based upon our existing, I guess I direct this to City Manager Marlowe, an existing contractual relationship with our current city attorneys, which may or may not change.
It's an excellent question. This number and the specifics really should be directed to City Attorney Cow. We asked for the number. The increase of 35,000. Let me take a step backwards. Our general legal fees are typically based on the retainer that we're charged by the city attorney. Currently, that amount is $11,000 per month. The current city attorney firm did submit a proposal that would increase their retainer on July 1st to $14,500. By my math, that's an increase of $42,000 over the course of the year. So I'm not sure what this 35,000 number is, but I'm sure that City Attorney Cow could reflect that for you.
Thank you. City Attorney Cow, can you explain? I believe that it's best directed to you, wherever you are in cyberspace. I don't see you, but I know.
I'm here. That's correct. Under the current retainer amount of $11,000 per year, we would come out to $134,000 for the year after you add in reimbursable costs. And then if we had the opportunity to stay on with the city, the new monthly retainer starting July 1 would be $14,500. Over 12 months, that would total $174,000. And then we added in about $100 per month estimate for reimbursable costs, such as like mileage, copying fees, messenger services. And so when you add in that reimbursable cost to the monthly, it brings us to $175,200. And then that's the difference between the next fiscal year's retainer amount plus estimated costs subtracted with what we were estimating to complete this fiscal year out at.
All right, thank you. I'll leave it in and
Any other council member have any questions or comments on the proposed city attorney budget? Yes, Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I see that we are proposing about 1/3 less for litigation than we proposed this year. Is that based on the optimism estimate for 2021? Or is there some other factor taken into account of why we're reducing it?
And if I may, I can go ahead and take that one as well. There is there is going to be a decrease in the estimated, Vice Mayor, because there have been certain litigation cases that have wrapped up. There are other cases that are currently pending that we expect to be wrapped up before the next fiscal year starts, because certain writ hearings and things like that should be wrapped up this year. And so because those particular lawsuits will wrap up by this fiscal year, we wouldn't estimate a higher or an increase in litigation services for those particular cases. So in short, lawsuits that are pending should be wrapped up or wrapping up already by next fiscal year.
Thank you, Council. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments on city attorney proposed budget? Thank you. Next department, please.
Great. The next department is the city manager's office. Their budget is $868,000 next year. It comprises a personnel budget of 17, and that's 3.5 FTEs in the department. And service and supplies the budget is $251,000. As we discussed earlier, their main budget increase is due to the $40,000 citywide program marketing program, which includes the economic development, community services promos, and public works CIP projects. Overall, their budget is status quo beyond that. I'll turn it over to the mayor for questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council on the proposed city manager's budget? Yeah.
This goes back to the marketing and branding. I had put them together, I'm sorry, in the first, because I think of all these city expenses as hers, but this had to do with the new line item for branding and marketing that I'm hoping to see, if we need the money, could be better spent in specific programs such as community development or Parks and Rec or whatever, as opposed to a separate thing that's managed separately from those goals. Because I do support and understand that this is an important thing, but I don't think we need to market the city so much as some of the areas, the businesses, and other departments within our city that need it. So I'd like to see it more targeted.
So, council member, are you asking that that be allocated out by department, taking that 40,000?
I would just eliminate it and then have this come back to us in future years as the need persists, because I do think we have a significant amount of money, for example, in the community development budget, if you will, for this, that could be spent first before we go on to this. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question.
Yes, please.
I think we discussed this in our finance subgroup, but it's something that I think would be helpful for us to know as a city. Many of us have been pleased that we have the Chinese translation and engagement program. And how are we measuring that effectiveness? Is there some way, it's great that we have the translation. Are people reading it? Are people responding to it? Or are we not hitting a monolingual population and the bilingual simply going over to the English? Is there some way that when we do the Chinese translation, say on the great weekly reports that go out to the community, that we could have some kind of check-in? Please respond here, and maybe just have a quick link to check if you have read this. I would just like to know that the program is effective, and if it is. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, thank you. I can answer that and provide a few comments. I appreciate that sentiment because I think that's a great point. Right now, we are able to track how many people are clicking on the links.
Oh, great.
We track it. There's a few caveats to that, though. As you know, we send it out mostly through our email list. We can see how many people clicked there.
And what is that current number?
We're getting about 10 clicks per email list that goes out, which is not strong, but I would say a lot of people then forward that link, and that's the piece we're missing. We can't tell how many people. I know we have members of the Chinese club who forwarded onto their community list, so they don't have everything they don't need. They just see the Chinese piece. We also
And
posted
how many people get the
about
emails?
700 are on our email list. We also posted on our website. As we think about this program in the next year, there's a lot of improvements we want to make. We had some issues with our website in that we weren't allowed to actually post Chinese characters embedded in a website. They fixed that now, which will allow us to better track that exactly as you talked about. Once we can actually put Chinese characters as a website, we can make a special page that houses all that information chronologically and historically, as opposed to one-off PDFs that get uploaded. That would allow us to better track it, as well as provide, like you said, some feedback options for people to provide feedback on how the translations are, if they're working, what other information they'd like. Obviously, this year we proactively did quite a few of our emergency translations and some of the other bigger picture community engagement efforts. But we have a lot bigger plans for next year. Obviously, COVID kind of didn't allow us to do as much of the engagement as we would have wished to. So next year we plan on spending that budget fully and doing a lot more of that engagement and tracking.
Thank you. That's a helpful bit of information. And no, 10 clicks certainly doesn't feel robust. And I know we have good partners with the Chinese club. They may not be reaching the whole monolingual speaking community, but I feel strongly that we get better use out of this. And I certainly feel what you are attempting, and I know COVID has been an issue. Thank you.
I'd like to get, some alignment with the group around the 40,000 for the marketing program and provide feedback.
And Mayor, I'd like to speak to that before you
Okay,
deal
yeah,
with it.
because I personally see, a need to better communicate with the residents around, tree pruning and ordinances and economic development, and 40,000 feels like the right number for a fully integrated marketing program, but I'd sure like to see what the details of it would be before, launching on and executing on the program. And I'm curious where, other council members' thoughts are.
I join you in that regard, especially since we have a community engagement manager, so we're not going to go out and contract with people. There's also the reference to the, what are the actual collaterals, which is gobspeak to me. And I was waiting for George Orwell in my dreams last night to explain it to me, but it didn't happen. So before we go out and approve 40,000, I want to know what that's going to be.
And can I ask a question though, related?
Please.
And I meant to do this initially. There is a line item in the city manager's office called advertising. And I don't know, which has $40,000. It's gone up and down. So I wanted to know what's included in that. I have no idea. And also compliment you on the Chinese translation. I think it's critical. And I think more people than are clicking on it, as you say, share it through WeChat and other host apps that are not trackable in the same way. So we do need to focus on that. I appreciate you're on that. Thank you.
I can answer that clarifying question before we get into the bigger picture about marketing. That's a great question, and maybe we should change the name because it is kind of confusing. The advertising is actually the legal advertising we do for any ordinances that need to be published in the newspaper before they go. So that's all the legal advertising we do in the newspaper.
So it's here as opposed to under planning and building, for example.
Yes, because although, thank you, Director, for all of your work. You help us spend that money. There could be other ordinances as well. It's not always in his shop, although it tends to be.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Wait a minute, they have their own budget for advertising.
They have a planning commission that they do some advertising for as well. The Community Development Department.
Yeah, they have a $15,000 line item for advertising as well.
The advertising in the city manager's budget is related to the city clerk function, which supports the council. So this is the public noticing that's required when we bring things to you.
So that is not when someone's seeking a variance or CUP, we have to put out a legal notice. That falls under the community development budget.
Yes,
Okay, so let's just make sure we're right on that one.
we have lots of legal advertising that we do as a city.
And regardless where it comes from, I get calls from residents quite often with an assortment of questions, how to find. And most of the calls I receive are available on our website. With some way to help the community, to make that be their go-to first, and let them feel the empowerment of it. Through no fault of staff, I just don't think it's the best software or whatever that we can have, but it is what we have right now, and I'd really like us to teach the community how to be more engaged with our website. I think that would only be helpful. So if that takes money, that might be part of the accountability. And by no means was I suggesting to remove the translation, but rather how to get it to be more robust.
Dr. Marlowe, you got a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I actually want to build on some of what you were describing about this particular item. The genesis of this was actually that the economic development team wanted to launch a holistic marketing approach for economic development. That includes bringing in a consultant who specializes in branding and marketing and creating materials, collateral, if you will, that we can send out that reflects the tone and vibe of the community and markets us in the way that we want to be marketed. Simultaneously, you will recall over the last couple of years, stemming from the Blue Ribbon Committee, there has been an increased interest in having community services improve their marketing products in terms of advertising programs, getting better penetration into communities we haven't gotten to previously, and so forth. We also receive commentary, and this perhaps speaks to what Vice Mayor Jacobowski is referring to, about wanting more information about public works projects and so forth. So there are a lot of marketing needs, which is, I think, what Councilmember Shepherd-Rami was speaking about. We don't want to be having multiple marketing campaigns going on in different departments. That's not a cohesive way to go forward. And so the idea here is specifically to not embed the money into different departments, but to bring it under one umbrella, which is a community engagement manager, to run a full-blown marketing program that would help all of these areas. So I just want to set your mind at ease. This is not a marketing program for me. I will not be marketing myself. This really is to market all of those programs of the city that we need marketing on in a consolidated and holistic way.
Thank you. In an effort to move this forward, can I suggest that we leave the $40,000 in the budget, but ask that a plan come back to us for approval before it's allocated and spent?
Well, I agree, perhaps we should, but none of that money can be spent then at this point under the ordinance that allows the city manager to spend or for the city to spend under an amount without approval of council. So just as long as that 40,000 cannot be spent, one dime of it cannot be spent until such time as we see a plan, then I agree.
You'd like it frozen until budget approval.
Right.
That's fair.
And I am still against it. I don't think this should be done through, in this way, a holistic. I don't think City of San Marino needs a brand. I don't want to see that created. I don't want to pay a consultant. Just let me finish. I don't want to pay a consultant to come in and do this. We have an excellent person, Ms. Fowler, who's there. She's doing a lot of things, but I think this is well within her abilities as well as the individual plans. If we want to push information out through Director Cervantes' department, it is Director Cervantes who's doing brochures and things like that. He is on it. We need to help him continue to do what he's doing. And the same with the new rec department director, or the same with Parks and Public Works. If we have information, it should be department by department. And I think it is a waste of money to brand the city of San Marino. If people don't know, that's fine with me. Then they can figure out that we're here when they drive right through.
Yeah, I don't perceive this marketing program to be branding San Marino. I think it's to communicate with the residents around the programming that's being done and the ordinances and helping build the economic development.
More to follow.
Yeah. All right, can we have a show of hands then that would like to leave the 40,000 in the budget contingent upon a plan coming back on what it really looks like? All those who would like to do that? Those who would like to remove the 40,000? Okay, you have your direction. Any other questions around the city manager's budget? I have one. Could you explain what the other contract services is, please? On page 2-33.
So we have two line items for other contract services. We obviously have the IT line and then just the,
Yeah, it was the one above that went from 54 to 134.
I see. So that would be where that marketing would live, as well as our Chinese engagement. So those are the two main driving costs of those.
Okay, so then the advertising there is just purely the legal postings.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have some questions.
Yes.
As well. First of all, when is City Hall going to reopen?
We are in development of that plan right now. We actually anticipate opening the library before we open City Hall. The main challenge there is that we do have staff sitting in the library right now that are not library staff, so we need to get them out. We are working on a plan. We are not quite ready to unveil a specific date, but that should be coming probably in the next week.
Okay, because I do note that our full-time salaries during 2020 were $335 with a lot of part-time wages. And you're looking to get back to $427. Am I correct that that $335 was based upon the fact that we didn't have people working full-time in City Hall?
No, that's not correct. That money was low. As you know, Community Engagement Manager Fowler had a beautiful baby and was off for a time period. Amanda Merlot worked on her behalf. She was not a full-time permanent employee, so she got paid as a part-time employee, including overtime.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions regarding this proposed city manager's budget? Seeing none, next department, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Next department is the El Molino Viejo, or the Old Mill budget. Sorry if I pronounced it.
Still new here, aren't you? Just call it the old mill.
I'll just call it Old Mill. Budget is 56,000. It's not changing from this current fiscal year. I'll turn it over to the mayor.
Any questions or comments from council members on this?
I thought Director Throne had come forward because there has to be work done there. I don't know whether it was irrigation or something that came within the purview. And I noticed it didn't change, but I just wanted to, I thought that it would because there was going to be grounds work, or I can't remember what it was, but you had spoken to some project there that needed to be done.
That is in your capital program for a future year.
Okay, so it's not, thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments regarding the old mill? Seeing none, next department, please.
Yes, next department is dear to my heart, finance. Our budget next year is, really quick, $972,000, comprises a personnel budget of $555,000 for FTEs in my group, and services and supplies at $416,000. The main driver is the equipment cost allocation, the $21,000 increase, and that's for the staff computers that we replaced this year. There's also, which I didn't highlight here, but it's also due to the utilities going up, and that's the telecommunications and also electricity that resides under my budget. That's really what's driving those, the budget increase. But other than that, it's really a status quo budget for next year. I do want to touch on non-departmental because that's another department that I oversee. The budget is $1.3 million. There's a personnel budget of $200,000, and that's not really personnel, meaning salaries, but it's due to the OPEB budget for next year, and service and supplies of $595,000, and lastly, debt service of $531,000. Overall, we expect the COVID budget to decrease about $20,000, being that we're hoping that we get out of COVID sooner than later. And also debt service, we do see a decrease in debt service of $18,000. Just want to highlight that our only debt is due to mature in fiscal year 23-24. So that'll be a savings of $530,000 or so starting fiscal year 24-25. Something to look forward to. I will turn it over to the mayor.
Thank you. Any questions or comments regarding the finance or the non-departmental proposed budget?
Yes, I have one concerning the non-departmental budget, and this gets to our fee schedule. I think I discussed with Director Chung and wanted to see what other city council members thought on this. For example, I'm on page 249. It's the first time there's a city hall credit card fee. Not the first time, I'm sorry. I'm bringing this up as this is the first time in our budget where we have something that's partially passed on as a cost. And I think that our fee study, if I'm correct, you said the method was to take an average of sort of our carriers and then we get a percentage of that for recovery. So it was like a 1.7%, which I don't know what credit card company just charges 1.7, but I assume there's out there. So I'm concerned that we aren't passing these costs on to whoever is incurring the credit card. I think it's partially in building and planning, partially in rec, library. I'm sure there's a lot, but we should be recovering this from whoever's making the payments. And if it's very complicated in this percent way to do it, then I think that we need to divide that up and focus on realizing 100% of that.
It's 2.7 is what was
2.7,
proposed,
thanks.
yes, for recouping some of these credit card fees. Maybe I need some clarity, council member. What direction would you want me to do regards to this?
Well, if it's at 2.7, I don't have that. I looked for the schedule.
Gotcha.
But glorious, I was trying to get through it when it was attached 2 meetings ago
Yes.
and actually focused in on this. But I want the emphasis to be on things like this to have us realizing 100%. It comes later because,
Yes.
I have another concern. But I'm wondering, I don't know what other city council members feel like this should be a cost that's passed on as opposed to continuing to grow, and I think it will over time. Next year, we'll probably have much more robust because people are very used to doing things on credit cards. And it saves staff money, time in the sense, but not if it's costing the city, continues to grow.
If we try to increase the fees by 3%,
Yeah, and I don't
So-
know, but they had a method for coming out, but I agree, I think it should be higher.
I'm bringing the master fee schedule back to the council on the May 28th meeting. I will have that for you there. It seems like you're recommending that I increase it from 2.7 to 3%. Is that what I'm hearing?
I mean, that was my idea, just to, or 2.7.
Well, we did discuss this with recommendations, correct, when we had it before us as a preliminary. So what you're bringing to us is based on the consensus from our discussion, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so then we look at it and say, we still go there, or no, we increase it.
It's at 2.7. I'll bring it to the council at 2.7, but at the final adoption, council can always change that percentage.
I kind of look at credit card fees as a cost of doing business, and you just bake it into your pricing structure.
Mhm.
You will lose some payments, not necessarily in planning and building, but perhaps in rec, if there isn't that convenience.
It's also safer. I mean, you're not handling cash.
And it's a pain in the neck to handle cash or checks, which we seem to get a lot of, and that is worth a fee in itself, because as I harp on, how many hands have to touch that when it
Yes.
comes through as cash?
Great.
Any other thoughts or questions regarding the finance or non-departmental budgets? Do you need any other feedback, Director?
I do not.
Next department, please.
Yes, the next department is the HR's budget. Next year's budget is expected to be $1.3 million, and that comprises of a personal budget of $273,000 and service and supplies of $1.1 million. And just to note, the reason HR's department, even though they have 2 FTEs, is at 1.3 is because they also oversee the general liability, and also the workers' comp resides under HR's budget. The increase for next year really is at $20,000 for the legal services labor, and that's really just correcting the budget or updating the budget as we looked at historic spending, and so we needed to adjust that budget up. But also on the flip side, we do expect a decrease in our insurance premiums from CJPIA, so that's a good sign. I'll return it over to the mayor for questions.
Any council members have any questions or thoughts regarding the HR budget?
Yes, I do, regarding the legal costs. our contract legal services typically increase when we're negotiating with our employees. We budgeted 90,000 last year, spent 46 in the previous year, which was a negotiation year. I believe we had 125. What had you come to the 110,000? Because that's 20,000 over last year's budget.
Scott, could you take that? Thanks.
So looking historically, I think we budgeted last year's budget to 90,000. And when I went back to look at the legal costs, the legal costs were roughly $20,000. And so looking at the historical, what's been spent for legal services, along with also the negotiation legal expenses, that's where we came up with $110,000.
You mentioned $20,000 in there. What was the 20,000 for?
Looking forward to negotiations, which we anticipate to begin January 1st of 2022.
Oh, so your estimate as to those costs related to negotiation are 20,000. Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions, or comments regarding the HR budget? Seeing none, move on to the next department, please.
Great. The next department is the Community Services, or I'm sorry, Community Development Department. I just wanted to highlight there's one typo / correction on page 2-62. And this wanted to highlight in about midway through on page 2-62, there's a on the general plan, the $600,000, towards the end of that paragraph, in parentheses, it says, the city has collected a total of $147,508 since 2003. That should have been 2013. Okay. So I wanted to let Councilmember Shepherd Romney know that she actually, we discussed this and realized after our discussion that number, that year was wrong. 2013 was when the general plan maintenance fee was adopted by council. So that was a little typo on my part, I apologize. With that, the Community Development Department budget is $2.4 million. Personnel is $1.2 million with 10.5 services and supplies at $1.1 million. As I stated earlier, that includes a code enforcer officer, that's about $118,000. Also includes a $600,000 general plan, but also, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. But then there is a decrease of $50,000 on the housing element consultant. That's a one-time budget that's not rolling over till next year. I'll turn it over to the mayor for questions.
Any questions or comments regarding the Community Development Department's proposed budget?
Yes.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I guess this is for Director Cervantes. An estimated 23,500 remaining for under expenditure in the ED projects. What specifically would you have expected that to be for, and why didn't that occur?
So you're referring to the economic development expenditure? Can you repeat that?
Right, it's on page 261, and down near the bottom, there's the hollow bullets, the second one down. Under expenditure, just so we'll have an idea.
Oh, yes.
Going away or going to the next year, or what your plan is. That's
No,
all.
it would likely be going on to next year. I would have loved to spend some of that money on additional advertisement for marketing and for the businesses and so forth. We did have a plan laid out for creating a brochure for economic development, basically a fact sheet for our businesses. That we didn't have enough time to put that together, although we did RFP and received proposals for that. We felt that the proposals were a little high, and so we want to sort of regroup on that. I'd love to have those funds move over to the next fiscal year because I believe that one of my goals is to have that brochure put together.
So, for example, not to belabor too long, the ads that we're seeing right now in the Tribune promoting San Marino shopping, is that part of this pot of money?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Gretchen, you have some questions?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Mayor. My first question is related to cost recovery again. You know, I looked at, I guess, the general plan fee, which is something that's built into the building permits and things like that, right? It's part of that calculation. And I looked at other cities. For example, La Cañada has a much greater detailed fee schedule that goes on for multiple pages depending on the value of the house and the things that need to be done. And it can go, you know, up very high to the tens of thousands, depending on the house, the redevelopment project. And this gets to, again, we are limited to a very small amount of money, which means that we're not really recovering things like the general plan, which affects those building and residential, commercial improvements that we're looking forward to the committee. And instead, I think that you went into this a little bit, and I'm glad that in 10 years, we have 20 years, that we've accumulated 147,000, which is essentially a quarter of what our general plan cost is estimated at. Because right now, we're adding in a huge amount to update our general plan, which is a multi-year process that we're going to initiate. So again, I'm concerned that we're not recovering enough through our fee schedule, because we should have at least, the council decided 50%, right? And I know it's complicated because then you look at multiple years, but at least 50% of these things. So we really need to look at this, the general fee plan assessment as a line item to do that, because it's caught up with all the other costs. And I think it should be broken out as other cities do it in our schedule, so we capture money specifically for general plan, that's a percentage or however, and then there's the cost of the actual permit itself, depending on the size of the project, because they're put together as one. And when you look at it that way, as opposed to this number, you know, we're not capturing 50% of our costs in this regard. I'll put it that way. It's complicated, I understand, but I want to bring that up again because I really think those costs have to go up here. And I don't know what the instruction was, and at the time, I was not aware that it was meant to cover this, that we have to do every 10 years, I mean, the city does, and we need to be capturing more than 25%, although it's complicated, I understand. So I don't know if the council members agree that to look at this. I don't know where we left it with you, but before we get that final fee schedule, you advised me that we need to bring it up today to have you take a greater dive on this with Director Cervantes to see where we need to go to capture this money.
So yes, I do need direction, being that when we met, the general plan maintenance fee was basically kept at status quo, meaning back in 2013, when it was approved for the first time, the city council at the time said, let's only recover 50%, which then meant 7% was the fee itself. Now, if and that's what I proposed, I kept it the same at 50% support from the general fund, basically not covering, not recovering 100%, keeping at 7%. So and that's how it's currently proposed. Now, if the city council wants me to change that number higher, I could of course do that when I bring it back to council on May 28th.
And we have to update the plan every 10 years, is that correct?
No, you're not mandated to update the general plan at any specific time frame. Only the housing element requires an 8-year amendment or update process, but the general plan is not required to be amended or updated at a certain period of time.
How often do we typically update the plan? Because I'm
It should
kind of
be-
aligned with Gretchen that we should create a fee structure and put those funds into an escrow account so that when the general plan needs to be refreshed, you know, that money is already sitting there for it.
Can I follow up with a question?
Please.
Director Cervantes, so what are the pros and cons of increasing this recovery rate?
Well, the only concern that I have is recovering funds that exceed your expenditure. You never want to be in a situation where you're sort of charging fees where at the end of the year you're resulting in higher than what's the right word to say here?
Yeah, the profit.
The profit, right.
Yeah.
So you don't want to create a profit situation. That's the concern that I always have every year. And so we always look at our building permit fees to make sure that we're in line with not exceeding our expenditures. So that's the only concern with looking at percentages and increasing them up or down. But with this respect of going from 7 to 14%, possibly, I don't see that as being a problem because it's a small jump in my mind.
And it's also in an escrow account as this was, or I don't know where the money is now, this 147.
I wanted to make sure it's not in an escrow account.
Okay.
It's not restricted. It goes straight to the general fund.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, again, I would think those fees collected should be earmarked for this purpose and be restricted so that when it comes up every X years, the cash is sitting there.
I understand. It's up to the council if they will, if the council decides to restrict that general plan revenue, I could do that. Right now, it's just going straight to the general fund. I feel that being that I'm responsible to oversee the general fund revenues, that to restrict additional revenues gives me less control in a sense. So whereas if it just goes into the general fund pot, that we have more flexibility. That's the way I view it, but it's really up to the council if they want me to go ahead and restrict this general plan maintenance fee revenue. I could always do that.
May I ask one quick follow-up? How do you trace this 147, or how do you, I mean, this is a very specific, I'm sorry, 147, I need my glasses, 508. I mean, that's pretty precise. So if it's not, how are you keeping track of this? I think the point is just it's important to keep track, so then when we do update again, we have money to pay that consultant, and it's not, again, a hit over 1 year.
It's a great question, being that we do track it. We have a separate line item dedicated called general plan. So we do track it there. It's in the general fund pot of money, but we do have a dedicated line. Now, historically, I don't think we were good historically. I can't go back since 2013 that we actually had a dedicated revenue line, and Director Cervantes on this particular item, but we've basically corrected it. I don't know when, but at one point, a couple of years ago, we did correct that and created a separate line item to track this. So we are tracking it. We just don't restrict it.
Okay.
Yes.
May I ask a question about the general plan itself? It's been a while since it was updated, right?
Correct, 2003.
2003. And I don't know how to quantify it, but how much work would you say really should be put into it to bring it forward over 20 years? Does it require quite a bit? I'm asking rhetorically because I really don't know.
It does require a lot of work. We have 6 elements now, 2 of which are being updated currently, housing element and safety element. And so we can pull those out in terms of needing to do work on those 2 elements. But it really depends on the council. We have 6 elements and 4 that need to be updated. The update of the general plan opens up the possibility of adding additional elements that the council wishes to look at. Climate, environmental issues, things like that. Historic elements could be one as well. And that certainly could add to the workload. But if we're looking to update just the 4, I do anticipate a heavy amount of work, but mostly through the consultant. There's a heavy amount of outreach as well with any general plan update. But the legwork is mostly from the consultant's point of view. But if we're adding additional elements, then certainly there could be additional workload on that.
There's community meetings, there's putting together a group of citizens to sit on an advisory committee. It's time consuming, it's detailed.
Correct.
So
going
I'm
back,
glad you're going to be mayor when it happens.
Yeah.
But
so going back to the 600,000, because it is a substantial amount of money, how specifically did you get to that amount?
Based off experience, also running it through some consultants to find out that the number was accurate, and the number is accurate. half of the funds dedicated under the 600,000 is going to be a EIR, environmental impact report.
So right off the top, you say 300 for an EIR.
Half of it is an EIR.
This is really helpful to just sort of where this big sum of money adds up.
Right,
Thank
and
you.
as a comparison, the Huntington Library expansion project, that EIR was $350,000.
Okay.
The EIRs that we received for this facility were upwards of $50,000 to $100,000. So that gives you the range of what we're
So
looking at.
really, when you pull out the EIR, you're looking at something for about 300.
Correct.
Thank you.
What does the EIR look at?
The EIR looks at the policies and objectives that you built into the general plan and looks to determine whether there are any impacts to the environment.
Okay. And what are the 4 elements you're going to look at?
Land use, conservation, noise, safety. Those are the 4 so far. And of course, we have housing that's currently taking place now, and safety as well.
Okay, thank you.
And how long does it take for them to do this EIR?
The EIR alone, which will be simultaneous to the creation of the actual document, at least about 8 to 9 months of the process.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts, comments, or questions regarding the community development budget?
I don't know if you need direction about recovering that amount of money at a greater rate and what you would like me to, or how to phrase this, Mayor, in order to move forward and increase that in our scheduled fees.
What I was thinking was when I come back to council, I can have maybe some recommendations, meaning options for the council, keep it at 7%, 14%, and then maybe have a detailed breakout and have a third option to the council. And if you give me direction at that time, I can move forward with that.
That would be very helpful.
Great.
Thank you, Paul.
Yep.
Great.
Next department, please.
Yes, we got 3 more departments. Almost there. If my mic works. Parks and
Mayor, can we have a break at some point?
Okay, why don't we take 5 minutes?
Thank you.
I didn't hear that. Can I have my PowerPoint up, please?
Yeah, I know.
Great, thank you.
Just don't look up.
So we have three more departments. Parks and Public Works Department, their budget is $3.7 million. Comprises of a personal budget of $2 million. I have an FT of 16.5. Their service and supplies budget is $1.7 million. The overall department has 7 divisions. And overall, though, the department budget is decreasing for next year. Just wanted to highlight a few points here. $38,000 of the decrease was due to the director actually moving the construction management inspection services to the capital fund, freeing up the general fund. Also, the $111,000 PD renovation project that this year, that is no longer moving over to next year. But also at the same time, you do see throughout the divisions increases in utilities, especially in the water, also electricity. And then you do also see an increase in the tree pruning maintenance agreement. And that's purely due to just contractual labor costs that are increasing.
Any questions or comments on the Public Works budget? Gretchen?
Thank you, Mayor. This had to do with, I believe, Director Throne, there was an increase in the cost about the tree, or you're going to go out possibly, but built in a cost for the tree management of our parks and street trees, the city trees, if you will. Is that included in this, the increase, or was go ahead. I'm unsure where we are in that system, and I know I wanted to make a comment or a follow-up question.
Yes, we are anticipating that there's going to be a level of increased cost when we enter into a new tree maintenance agreement. The agreement we have right now is 5 years old and is based on 5-year-old prices. And basically the cost of providing that service has gone up in the last 5 years. So we anticipated from our perspective, a small price increase. However, we really won't know what it will truly be until we receive bids on that. And at that time, the council will be able to decide the direction. But we did put in the budget, I believe it was about $10,000 for parks and for grounds for an expected increase in the tree pruning costs.
Right, and so just to follow up, I was lucky enough to go to the tree tour at Lacey Park with our urban forester for the Earth Day sort of activities that we had in the city, and heard extensively from Mr. Estrada about the situation with our trees and his view that he has very limited amount of money for both pruning and as well as planting and replacing. And I even looked, considered that that's very important from our community responses and things like that. Second only to public safety, the gentleman next to you, the trees are mentioned from the survey by more than any other subject. So obviously putting public safety aside. And so there's a concern, and I heard it directly from our urban forester, that there's not enough money in the budget to do all that needs to be done. And he gets lots of resident requests, when is my tree going to be pruned? And as costs go up, the time between the frequency of those things is going to get even longer. So I'm asking you, or I don't know whether it's council, if we can allocate more money in this regard so we can maintain particularly our city trees. We can't do it for the public, and spend more money in this regard, so particularly our older ones will stay healthier longer. And we can replace with new decent sized trees that I know we've spoken of in the past. So I would like to see this actually be one area where I would increase and encourage you to come back with a number if other council members are similarly interested, because I believe the public and the urban forester has advised me in that regard.
Any other thoughts on this?
From what I can see is we have increased it between the grounds division and the parks division, $26,000. Some of it based upon pruning frequency. And,
Right.
and some of it based upon the
The
new,
10%.
the new
Up.
tree. And did you engage the arborist in your discussion of this budget?
Yes, I did, and
Okay.
he is helping me craft the RFP, and the comments that he made to you, council member, he's made to me, and he's written them into the RFP that we'll be publishing shortly.
And that is, this new RFP is used to anticipate the increase in costs?
It is our hopeful estimate. Without having gone out to get bids for it, it becomes very difficult to anticipate what it is. So we used what we thought was a reasonable escalator. However, until those bids come in, at that time, the council can make some budgetary decisions. I will try to structure it so that if you want to keep the current dollar amount or in that range, we'll have a fallback position for it.
What I think I'm hearing is when you go through the RFP project, make sure you're, doing the right thing. And if the number is a little bit bigger, council might be sympathetic to that and allocate more to doing what's right.
I have a very sympathetic council, yes.
And can I ask, there is also another I'm sorry, parks, there's also another line item which has not been increased. It's 25,000, and that's for plants, which I'm assuming, well, it's a lot of different plants, but a portion of that as well is tree replacement, which we've seen 100+ trees a year that we're having to replace, if not more. And there's no recommended change from last year in that regard?
There is not. That is a sufficient amount of funding for us to take care of plants other than trees, and any funding that we have unexpended for other than tree plants, we buy trees. Part of the challenge for us is you want to buy plants and then plant them right away. You really don't want to have a stock of plants, because certain times of the year you really have to take, they're better taken care of if they're in the ground. So we plan accordingly, and there are some plants that we have to schedule what their growth cycles are.
Is there a tree line? I'm not seeing it. I thought this included trees.
We have trees in your capital program, as well as trees embedded in your parks and grounds line items for plants. So we do have tree purchases and tree replacements in 2 locations.
Okay.
I guess I'm not seeing it and was hoping to see an increase there, so it would reflect that we could keep up with the demand.
You do have a budget allocated in your capital program for major tree replacement, and that's $50,000, which was proposed, and you you're seeing that back when you see the formal capital program.
Okay, and is that the same as last year, or is this a new item? I'm just asking because I am not tracking it as to where, so I guess.
It is the same as this current year.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, Vice Mayor?
Quick one, and this may have gone over my head. Contracted street sweeping, that was going out for bid. Did that occur?
We are currently trying to arrange a meeting with the finance subcommittee so that we can come and talk to you about amending the solid waste contract to include street sweeping and avoid having to go out to an RFP.
Still at a financially advantageous point for the city?
Oh, yes.
We're ready. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Rachel?
One other thing that having to do, this comes under your department too. The citywide traffic circulation study was coming back to us with neighborhood traffic calming recommendations, I guess, but we have not seen them yet. And I do not remember, have we already put some money aside in our capital improvement? I don't know where it would go, so I'm asking you first. Where would I see that if we wanted to go forward with these recommendations that we haven't yet seen, but we all agree that public safety is a top priority? where would I see that money? And has there been an increase to accomplish some of those goals in the next fiscal year?
You will be seeing those next Friday as part of your capital program. That was one of the items that you asked for us to look at and to
Okay.
boost that particular program. And you'll see that next month, and we did boost it.
And do we have the report yet, or when will we be seeing the report and the recommendations actually from the expert or the consultant? At the same time, I'm just asking.
The report went to the Public Safety Commission at their meeting earlier this month. It's been floating around the city for public comment. We've not received a vast amount of public comment. One of the things I'm going to be doing is reaching out to the specific intersections where there are proposed traffic calming measures, as it were, and really engage those residents because they will be the ones most impacted by changing of intersections. And then I will be bringing that back to the Public Safety Commission for their June meeting, and then the council will see it shortly thereafter.
Can we see what is being, can you forward to us what is being, circulated? Because I don't think that it's been sent to us. as well.
I can certainly send it to you. It's also one of the trending items on the facing page of your website. So if you open your website, there's a link there to the documents, but I can certainly have copies made for council.
Thank you. I would appreciate one.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments regarding Parks and Public Works budget? Next department, please.
Thank you, Mayor. The next department is Fire Department. One second. Okay, Fire Department. Fire Department's budget is $6.1 million. Their personnel budget is $5.3 million, comprises of 21 FTEs, and their service and supplies budget is $800,000. Overall, the department's budget is a status quo budget. You do see some line items increasing, decreasing, but overall, it's the equipment cost allocation increase of $38,000. Other than that, just some areas of interest that the chief had mentioned was some recruitment and then position coverage due to overtime. And then the other department that the fire department oversees is emergency management, or EOC. The budget is $77,000, and there you'll see a personnel budget of $19,000 next year. The emergency management usually does not have personnel budget. This is really due to COVID, and hopefully we wouldn't have to utilize all that budget, but we wanted to have some budget in there next year. Also on service and supplies, $58,000. Overall, it's just a status quo budget, and the reason for the decrease in budget that you see overall as a department is due to the personnel budget decrease for next year for COVID expenses. Return that back to the mayor for questions.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments regarding this?
I just have one, and it relates back to the equipment cost allocation. You know, I could see the Zoll defibrillator, the Autopulse resuscitation system, those being against, because that's smaller equipment that comes out of the general operating budget. But why do we use equipment cost allocation for what are basically capital costs, for example, new rescue ambulances, or are they part of the operating budget as well? Why is that applied here as opposed to our capital budget?
It's a great question. Because it's still under the umbrella of the equipment, not infrastructure, because we don't capitalize infrastructure. We only capitalize, do equipment cost allocation, depreciation on equipment.
Okay,
And
so
the ambulances,
and that's considered equipment?
Yes.
Okay, then I understand that. Thank you.
Anything over $5,000, we do the equipment depreciation on.
Thank you. Any other questions, Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I've got a few really quick questions for Chief. All roads lead to Verdugo. So in that case, do they give us increases at will, or do we have a set contract for a length of time with them?
Their contract provides for a 5% increase annually.
So they use their 5 every year?
Not every year, but yes. In recent history, yes.
Okay. Thank you. And just as a quick passing, maybe 2 sentences will do, since we really don't have another vehicle for it. Are things all just fine in our joint command with South Pass?
Actually working quite well right now.
Great to hear. And last question, I heard Councilmember Talt bring up AutoPulse. Out of curiosity, hopefully we're not using that a lot, but comment on the use?
The AutoPulse, we purchased a second AutoPulse now. Both
Right.
ambulances possess that piece of equipment. It's so effective. It has really been effective on basically our most critical patients, those that are in cardiac arrest. And this year, it was so effective, it even permitted us to transport, unfortunately, people that probably shouldn't have been transported to the hospital. And the hospitals put additional requirements on us for, due to COVID. They wanted us to stay in the home for 20 minutes. They wanted us to resuscitate and then ensure that for after 5 minutes, they maintained vitals. But that AutoPulse has really been effective, and with patients that are viable, it really does give them another opportunity.
So in terms of actual use, it's fair to say that through March of this year, according to your stats, it's probably been used on all 10 of those?
Yes.
Thank you. That's what I was curious about. I appreciate your responses. Thank you.
Can I follow?
Yes.
Do we lose any of those 10?
Unfortunately, it's not completely dependent on the skill of the paramedics or the AutoPulse. Sometimes the underlying conditions are just so critical that it doesn't allow
Are we
us
having
to.
better success with the AutoPulse?
Yes, we have had better success with the AutoPulse.
Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Any other questions on this department?
On one statistic that's included in your report, that on the bottom of 2-104, and that's the cardiac arrest return of spontaneous circulation. And our numbers actually, everything else looks great and going in the right direction, so to speak, generally. And so, but then I thought, we went from 7 in last year to 0 so far today, but possibly 2. So I'm just trying to figure out why this, particularly with the AutoPulse, is this the category that it comes in with, or it affects? I'm just trying to understand the statistic and why we have it here.
So that's the way, method which EMS systems are quite often measured is the number of cardiac arrests that we respond to, and then the return of circulation, which is we get your heart started again. As I was explaining though, unfortunately, if somebody has underlying conditions like terminal cancer or other conditions that really they're not going to be viable, we are still bound to try to resuscitate them unless there's some order that prevents us from doing that. And as I stated, this year, the hospitals actually put additional, I won't say barriers, but requirements that they had to meet certain criteria before they went to the hospital with COVID patients, where they would be intermingled with COVID patients. So that has skewed the numbers to a degree.
All right, thank you. That's helpful. And so this is something that you were required or we're required to report in this method.
We use this as part of our quality improvement program. As I stated, it's one way to measure one system against another. And we review every one of these with our nurse educator, with the on-duty crew, to ensure that all the protocols were followed appropriately.
All right, thank you very much.
One last question. Don't forget to strike from your budget the fire overtime for 4th of July. And I believe, does police have that in there as well? Police overtime for 4th of July? No, you do not.
There's some.
Not a separate item.
Any other thoughts or comments on this department? Next department, please.
Last but
Oh,
not
that's
least, we have the police department's budget,
No.
$8.1 million. The personnel budget is the $7 million, 40 FTEs, and then the service and supplies at $1.1 million. The department is, the biggest increase really is driven by their $77,000 of it is the flock safety camera. They're adding 2 more additional cameras. They're actually bringing in from the capital side back into the operating side because these are leases. And then not all reflected up on the PowerPoint, but the crossing guard contract is also going up quite a bit. So that's reflected in next year's budget. And last but not least, $113,000 of the equipment cost allocation, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, that's due to the 6 vehicles that we added and the 2 motorcycles that we needed to budget for. And I'll turn it back to the mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments regarding the police budget?
I have one, and it's more in the report. There's a discussion, this is on page 2120. You reference an uninspected impact of COVID-19. Is that it's going to go up because of COVID-19, or that you believe it might go up because of continuing issues with COVID-19?
It will go up because of COVID-19. We have a requirement of disinfecting the police vehicles, disinfecting the station, the front desk, and also maintaining a safe environment.
And is that, Chief, is there someplace in your more detailed budget on starting at 2129 through 2131 that deals with that, so it could be separated out and accordingly a recoverable cost under our ARP money?
Well, we track it under non-departmental, which is my budget. We track all expenses there. I believe I thought we pulled that out of you're talking about the additional detail, right, Chief, on the police vehicles?
Yes.
Okay.
I do.
We pulled that out and added it to our non-departmental COVID expense under materials and supplies. I just want to make sure I'm not I do know that it's pulled out and there's a budget separate for COVID-19 under non-departmental. I want to make sure.
So then when I would just spend some time and straighten that out, because is the increase 92,000 include the costs associated with COVID-19, or is it 92,000 regardless of the costs associated with?
If I can, the 92,000 isn't exclusive to COVID-19.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So the 92,000 is the cameras, it is inflationary increases on contract services and other expenses. And then there's a smaller portion that's related to COVID-19 that we will definitely clear up.
Actually, it's just a memo problem.
The memo problem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Working or not. Oh, there it is. That's just a leftover from before we moved the item. Originally, the cost for the COVID cleaning was in the police department budget. When we had our group meeting, we moved it over to COVID, but that's just a holdover on page 2-120 in the memo. It just didn't get taken out there. The 92,000 is, as you can see, basically mathematically, essentially made up of the all city management agreement and the flock safety.
Okay.
So we apologize. That's just a memo issue.
I just
Yeah,
wanted to
sorry
make
about
sure
that.
it was properly being tracked, because I would imagine that's a reimbursable cost.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Gretchen?
Two questions. One has to do with the all-city management, the crossing guard contract. Is that something, it's increasing, and it's not broken out, so I don't know by how much, but is that something that is what we can send out an RFP, or at what point are we in I know that the crossing guard is a difficult situation. We're also doing this basically for the schools, but public safety is so important for the children. So I'm trying to figure out how often is that contract up, and do we have other vendors, or is that something that you could foresee us putting out and trying to get a better cost for the city?
Great question. And we spent time looking at that. Every time we have a new contract, we go out and try and find another agency, another company. There is nothing. For the most part, the agencies in this area are either using All Cities or they have their own employees. That is a huge expense that I don't think is viable at all for us. We have seen an increase of All Cities since 2018 of $43,000. In part, it is related to the increase for summer school, where it used to be the PTA affiliates paid for the summer school crossing guards, that now they don't. That's been about 2 years. And then just general increases and the $15 per hour pay and their benefits and payers actually exceeds that because they have difficulty getting employees.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And the other question I had to do with a specific line item, sorry, I'm trying to find it.
Council member, is it possible to remove your mask? I have a hard time hearing you. Thank you.
I apologize. I am looking for the second one had to do with the increase in materials and supplies on page, I'm at 2-130. The from 13,000 was budgeted this year and changed to 18. And I was wondering the increase. And then below that, we also have a line item that is very underutilized, but that's stayed the same. I know COVID is an explanation for it, but we have $7,000 set aside each year for the last 3 years in the community relations. And so I wanted to see what you envisioned going in. Even if we go back, it was only 4,000 was spent pre-COVID, the full pre-COVID year. So I'm trying to see what you envision or whether that number will stay the same or should stay the same. I'm sorry.
For community relations specifically, yes, we think it should continue to be that. It allows us the flexibility to expand our programming. Even throughout this past year, we've expanded into a business watch program to where we've began having businesses meet with us, similar to Neighborhood Watch. Those are additional expenses. We want to be able to use some of the printing costs and the work related to the printing. That's why it went up for postcards and other communication methods. So we're looking at a variety of ways and expanding, in part, the officers' involvement in the community. Some of it is essential to growing our own way that we can communicate.
All right, so that had to do with the growth in the materials and supplies. You were answering that.
The materials and supplies, we have found that we've had an increase in the cost of toner. We're working with finance and IT to make sure that we have a unified type of printing devices that use the same type of toner. So that may decrease after the end of this coming fiscal year. The officers are using more and more gloves, and those are the primary drivers of that cost of materials and supplies.
All right, and then the gloves, though, should be part of our COVID expenses, correct?
Not necessarily.
Oh.
Our officers are encountering more and more people who are homeless and may have COVID, may have not. We can't ask that question. But the protocol for using gloves properly is at times use 2 gloves at a time. And that in the multiple times, so you may remove a pair of gloves after you encounter someone, search someone, you place them in the police vehicle, you have to remove the gloves, drive them to the jail, then you have to put on the gloves. So it's a lot of additional costs associated with that we haven't anticipated in the past.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Vice Mayor?
Yes, please, thank you. I should have been saying this all morning, but I felt each presentation has been wonderful, and the narratives have led to just a few quick questions and comments. So if I may, thank you for the report, though. Injury collisions were reduced by 24%. So what methods did you use to get those down that much?
Our traffic enforcement is based upon the primary collision factor. And sometimes it may be speed, sometimes it may be unsafe backing or unsafe or failure to stop. So we're trying to focus our traffic enforcement, and with the addition of the motorcycle officers, we will definitely be focusing on enforcement on the primary collision factors. And in this case, we've increased some of our speeding tickets and other citations. Also, the presence of the officers on Huntington Drive, Sierra Madre, and others where we have them. I think the additional speed feedback signs that were approved last year and the radar trailer has been very helpful in that regard.
Thank you. So I will seg into the motorcycle officers. A citizen reported to me that they were delighted to see the two, as they said, roar by the other day, which means they've completed all their training and they're getting out there. And I think it's going to be great, whatever you will have planned to introduce them to the community. But what is important for me is how you're going to measure both their success factors and the highest and best use. And who knows, we know we've got a lot of these traffic issues going south, for example, on San Marino Avenue from Huntington to Lorraine, and those poor students crossing for school. So will you be taking a number of different areas and seeing their effectiveness and having some form of measurement, possibly because who knows, and this is, again, I don't know, none of us know at this point, in the future, perhaps even flipping and going to a third, depending on what the department priorities are.
Excellent question. I need to correct you on one part. The officers that you see roaring by, and I'll have a conversation about
No, she meant
by.
it with excitement.
Oh, good. That's very good to hear.
No, not by speed, not speeding. The sound of motorcycles with the city was new.
Thank you.
Mhm.
The officers are in training. We're training in Downey, and they're coming from Downey. They're in preparation for their training school.
Okay.
That will be starting second week of May in Redlands. And we originally had them with the CHP Academy.
Yes.
That was not a success. So we're retrying the proper training. So with the officers using the motorcycles that they are riding right now.
What kept that from being successful?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
What kept the CHP from being successful?
The
in general
officer,
terms.
the officers had to ride Harley Davidsons.
Got you. I
And
remember
they
that. Yeah.
are a completely different beast. And we
A beast. Yes.
Yes. So we've got an alternative for them. They're doing a great job in their pre-training. We have specific benchmarks for them. We'll be looking at their recap, which what types of citations, what are the locations. So we'll be focusing our motorcycle enforcement on those two primary things, the location, the primary collision factor. We'll also be working with the community. As we have our neighborhood watch coordinators, they will be specifically working with the traffic complaints from our residents or the business to focus on those areas, work with the neighbors to try and resolve it. One thing that we've just done is, if you notice at Mission and Euclid, there is a sign courtesy of Director Throne that says yield to pedestrians right there in front of the San Marino Cafe, because we had complaints about vehicles not stopping. The business owners did not want us to cite everybody, understandably. So we're looking at alternatives that are less expensive and easier done by looking at a lot of different ideas. So we'll be doing that. We'll be looking at their successes in reduction of traffic complaints, as a third benchmark. And then we're going to continue their skills as trained investigators in traffic collision investigation. They'll be attending intermediate advanced traffic collision investigation courses. And we're also working with a grant. We've applied for a grant with OTC, which is the Office of Traffic Coordination in the state, that would provide us with grant funding and equipment to assist us. So those are just some of them that we have in mind, along with programs with the school district that we are hoping to launch in the fall.
Very exciting. And you should be able to recover at least one officer's full salary if you keep them just sitting on a side street watching the traffic down Huntington Drive. There are some very dangerous speeds.
Yes,
and
indeed.
I think that will be a significant improvement because it's not as if there's a black and white there.
One of the things that's helped us, if you've noticed any of our new vehicles activating their emergency lights, they're bright. Even in the middle of the day, you can see them for blocks. So that's helpful too.
Thank you, and I appreciate the explanation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments regarding the police? Yes?
I had one other comment. I actually like the metrics that were included with the fire department's section, and I would like to see more because I think you accomplished, or you and your department, SMPD, accomplished a lot last year in terms of traffic safety, the reduction in certain areas, but the graphics here, the metrics that are reflected, don't really help enough to explain some of those achievements. So I don't know. I know that you have other methods. You have an annual report and things like that. And so I wanted to see some more metrics here. So if a person looks at the budget or our residents, they understand what these programs, the results, I guess, of that. And then they could track them over time, should they be interested, because they might not have access to the other.
Council member, I've actually stolen from Chief Rueda some of the graphics and his designs. And my assistant, Vanessa Guillon, has completed those every month for public safety. So we will make sure that we include it, and we'll get a year-long assessment of those statistics in a graphic form that I think could be meeting exactly what you're looking for.
And that will be included in the final package, is that what you're saying? Or some of them, I don't know how many do you have, sorry.
Thank you. So as the conversation that Councilmember Shepherd-Rami and I had about this very issue, she's very excited to see more about what PD has accomplished over the last several months. We have consolidated the metrics in the budget with the metrics that you're getting now on a monthly basis. So I think what we're going to do is maybe sit down, pick a few that seem like they would be more important to the community, and we'll add them to both documents, both the monthly update and to this, so that we can keep it consistent. And then you'll have the full report that'll have even more detail.
All right, thank you, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments regarding the police department budget? Director Chung, do you have the feedback that you need?
Yes, I do.
City Clerk Baker, are there any public comments on the budget?
There are no requests for comment on the budget.
Thank you. Written communications. Do we have any written communications or public writings for distribution?
We do not have any written communications or public writing.
Seeing none. Public comments. Is there anyone wishing to speak at this time?
There is no one wishing to speak at this time.
Future agenda items. Do any council members want to bring anything for consideration for a future agenda item?
Yes, I have two items related to Planning and Building Department. From Director Cervantes, I think we have a pre-approved list, changes that are coming to our roof, and I believe it's this roof is the focus, roofing materials that are new items, composites and fiberglass that are being proposed, and I wanted to get an update before they make it onto the pre-approved list. And have City Council consider whether we want to continue to move toward 5 new man-made roof materials and have a discussion about that, because I'm concerned that this will, if they're over-the-counter approvals, really change the look of our city without us having to the ability to consider what's being recommended by a subgroup of the Planning Commission. And the other has to do with artificial turf. I understand that it has to be allowed in the city by state law, but we have not considered whether appropriateness and for environmental reasons and other public safety, the heat element, et cetera, that we need to consider a limitation on that, like we do, for example, on hardscape, and put a percentage in place that's an objective measurement before people can use it. Because those issues have come before both planning and design review. Thank you.
So we have two future items recommended. The first is a review of the roofing materials. So a straw vote. How many people would like to see that come before council? The other was around artificial turf. How many would like to see artificial turf come? Okay, there you go. Any other items people would like to bring to council?
I would just like to, and I know I've sent this to our city, and hopefully it'll come out in the coming weeks, but San Gabriel will be hosting an e-waste collection. I believe it's on May 29th, and if we could get the publicity out on that, since it is the closest to our area, and I know people would like to take advantage of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll adjourn this meeting.
Good job.
Shit.